Welcome to Healthy University, where we'll discuss issues and subjects on how you can live a healthier and more productive life. And now, here's your host for Healthy University, Alan Eisenberg.
Hi, this is Alan Eisenberg, and welcome to another episode of Healthy University. I'm so happy to have you here today. You know, I love spring. I love that it's out, and it always leads me to feel better because I like warmth. The cold weather just never does it for me, and I just look forward to getting into the springtime. I enjoy going to do the outdoor work. That kind of gives me a little mindfulness relaxation. It helps me be healthier. And I'm really excited about today's program because today I have Keith Deltano, and he is a winner of the Teaching Excellence Award. He's got a DVD, a comedy CD, and has won numerous national awards. But the biggest thing is he is the creator of the anti-bullying curriculum, the complete anti-bullying kit. Keith has served and worked with youth as a public school teacher, private counselor, youth worker, and U.S. Army Airborne Military Police Officer. I'd like to welcome you to the show, Keith. Thanks for coming on.
Alan, how you doing?
You know, I'm doing great, and I just love getting the chance to talk to you because you are sort of my future, I hope. You know, well, you've gotten out there and you've done it. And what I really like is that I know you've had your challenges too as a youth, and maybe even, you know, partially in your adult life as well. But you decided to do something about it. How did you get to this point? What brought all of this together for you?
Well, what put me on the road? I think it all goes back to third grade, Alan. I could not read. I could not read a word, not a letter, nothing. And I got to third grade by faking it, and they had pictures. And I'd look at the pictures and make things up. And I was right, but in third grade there was no pictures, which was a disaster. And they found out I was dyslexic, dysgraphic, ADHD, and CAPD, which is Central Audio Processing Disorder.
Yeah.
And I stayed back in third grade. And I was just a weird, freaky, odd kid. And I got picked on a lot. And so it's kind of in my past.
Mm-hmm.
And then I overcame all my learning disabilities. Not that you overcame them. You just kind of build coping skills to deal with it. You know, I don't make lists for everything. You know, my wife color codes things on my calendar, and we just roll happily along. But, you know, eventually I became a teacher. I joined the Army because I thought I would never, ever go to college. In the Army, I found out I could do things. You know, I was smart because I learned kinesthetically. I learned by moving around.
Yep.
And I got the crazy idea to go to college and help kids like me. You know, I was told I was stupid. I was told I would never go to college by a guidance counselor, you know, and I kind of figured things out, you know, and those of you that are listening that are adults, you know, there's times in your early 20s where you look back and you're like, you finally get some things. And I'm like, you know what? I think I can do college. And what happened to me in school was kind of a miscarriage of justice, you know?
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? I'm going to go and help kids like me. I'm not stupid. I'm just a little different. And I became a middle school teacher. And then I used comedy. And like, if you watch my clips, I do serious comedy. I taught math and you know, of all the things, because the guidance counselor that told me was never going to go to college told me not to try to take algebra because I couldn't do it. And I wouldn't pass it, and I'd stay back again. And so I ended up being an award-winning math teacher. Go figure. But I began to see pathologies, you know, sex, drugs, alcohol, bullying, racism, prejudice. And so I started writing shows to deal with those. And I would perform them in my classroom. So I addressed, you know, not only bullying, but a lot of other things that teens deal with. And then the principal heard about it and said, will you do it for the whole school? And then the principal down the street heard about it and said, if we send a sub over, will you send Keith down to do that thing he does on racism? And so it began to be something that I did in schools and churches when I wasn't in my school. And then in 96, I had to make a decision because it was getting very difficult to keep everything rolling,
Oh, yeah.
And so, I decided I'm going to hit the road, or at least try. I came home from school. I said, honey, I really think I feel called to help a lot more kids than I'm helping. And, I think I'm going to start teaching. My wife said, well, how will we eat? I mean, what if we don't make it? And I'm like, honey, I'm a teacher in North Carolina. We're broke already. It's not like we're going to get broker. It's, I could fill potholes if it doesn't work, and we're going to be okay.
I need you to come over and talk to my wife and tell her the same
well,
thing for
see,
me.
we didn't have kids at the time. You have kids.
I'm about to get rid of my last one, although that's going to cost me a lot to put him in college. So.
Yeah. So, and I've been rolling ever since, dealing with these, sex, drugs, alcohol, racism, prejudice, bullying. And so what I found was, because of my own personal story, especially when I'm in front of kids with learning disabilities, that struggle, but that resonates with the audience. In other words, there are people that speak about bullying that, they're magicians or they're entertainers, but I can look at them and say, hey, I stayed back in third grade. I was made fun of because I can't read. I was told by a guidance counselor I would never go to college. I was called, I was made fun of continuously, even though, I got to be a pretty good fighter and boxer. I was a boxer and I ended up being a boxer and a football player in school. And nobody touched me physically in high school, but it's, the psychological stuff, you're never going to be anything. You're stupid. You're not smart.
I mean, that was bullying by the school. I mean, that was on many levels. I'm sure you were bullied.
Right. But when I look back at it, that guidance counselor, I think she really just wanted me to get through high school and not get locked up in jail. Had she taken, but see, back then we didn't know as much. They didn't know as much. So I think people just looked at me, and I think that, adults, if they took time to get to know me, they might find out something was there. But here's a kid that has a hard, time with months of the year. I got to my locker and I'm in ninth grade. So, I just feel, and to counterbalance that, there were coaches and people that did believe in me.
Yeah.
So fortunately there was, but I mean, but I'll tell you this, and this is true, Alan, is I will look at an audience, and I use serious comedy in my show, but there's points where you can hear a pin drop, and I will say, there are some of you sitting here right now that have been lied to, and we don't know what the lie is. My lie was that I was stupid, and I bought the lie. I believed what the haters were saying. And some of you, and you can see kids tear up because these kids here, you're nothing. You're a slut. You're stupid. You're a druggie. You're poor. You're an African American kid from a poor neighborhood. You're never going to be anything. You're a kid that reads on a third grade level in eighth grade. You're never going to be anything. So they hear a variety of messages, and they believe them.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem is, as adults, we develop what we call the adult brain, right? So we start to rationalize.
That's exactly right.
So you rationalize, but when you're a young person, things are black and white. I always say, things are either good or bad when you were little, right? There's no middle. It's like you take a baby at the ultimate stage, and they're either crying or they're happy. There's no in the middle.
Right.
And as we age, we get more, but what tends to and can happen psychologically is your child brain can come back in and interfere, and especially at those what I call those crucial years, that it's sort of late elementary school to beginning high school years. If that starts to happen, you start to drink the Kool-Aid, as we say.
You drink the Kool-Aid.
You buy whatever someone's telling you because
that
you don't know any different. and for me, and maybe for you, you're looking at adults who you're rationally thinking, well, they're adults, they know, and that's that danger, right? That's that thing that I talk about from my, as we were talking about earlier before the show. My personal feeling is, that education of the educators is so important, that they understand that the words and what they say, good or bad, are going to have an effect. So, like you said, you had coaches and all that. I did theater, and I was going to get into you a little with that because obviously what you're doing, comedy, is somewhat like theater. And my theater teacher saved my life. I mean, she saved my life. She was
Yeah,
my
yeah.
mentor.
I had a
She
couple football
believed in
coaches.
me, you
I was
know.
suicidal my sophomore year.
Right.
But
And
but but here's the problem, Alan. The people listening to us right now are adults, right? Most likely. So
yeah.
here's there's a weird and strange thing that happens when you become an adult. You forget how your teen brain worked.
Oh yeah.
So you look at this kid who, and your 13-year-old daughter comes home a little upset because someone says something bad to her on a kick. So your adult brain goes, well, this is just a little comment and kick. This is no big deal. Her teen brain is freaking out
Yeah.
because her teen brain doesn't have a prefrontal cortex that does risk analysis and assessment. So, I'll talk to parents like, parents, do you have a kid that comes home and says, I can't sit with a popular table at lunch and they will make fun of me and I didn't get invited to the birthday party and my hair doesn't work. Shoot me now. I want to die. Right? Well, that is, and so you're looking at that kid going, what is this kid's problem? This is no big deal. And the reason is adult brains compartmentalize. So if we have a bad day at work, we can say, well, we're paying the mortgage, I'm still married, and my prostrate's not swollen, right? we can back up and we can, okay, for a 14-year-old brain, they don't do that. So if someone sends a naked picture out of them on Kick, right?
Yeah.
It's a personally rational thing to jump off a bridge.
Yeah.
In their mind.
Well,
That's where
they don't see any way to get out of what
they
they're in.
they don't think to themselves.
There's no.
They don't compartmentalize. So
Yeah.
compartmentalization is something healthy adults do. Now, some adults never learn this, and you know these people, Alan, that are adults and
Well,
some.
yeah. In fact, I want to do something with you. I do something when I speak, and you're bringing it all up, and I'm just curious because you're in the business that we're talking about. But I'm curious to try it with you because it's kind of proves your point, and it's the point I make that I never did forget. So I'm kind of the oddball guy who is an empath. I'm very empathic. So I was picked on because I'm very sensitive. So you want to make me cry, you can make me cry, um, and so things stick with me, like memories, and like I remember, like I'm a big music fan, and I can rattle off the year, the album, the artist of music from the 80s and get it right within a year because my mind works based on, oh, I was here and this was happening to me and that song was playing. And that's how I do it. It's just, it's not magic. So here's my little magic trick that's not a magic trick. So we're gonna go back. You were picked on. You said you got held back in third grade. Were you being picked on third and fourth grade? Somewhere?
Uh, it started the year I stayed back. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to that year. Take one of your bullies. Can you remember their first and last name? You don't have to say it, but can you remember
Alan,
it?
I could take you to the places where
Oh
things
yeah.
happen and stand there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just like I can. But you can
Right.
remember their first and last name, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, your best friend that year. Can you remember their first and last name?
Yeah.
Okay, who was your teacher?
I remember.
Who?
Oh, you want me to say the name?
Can you say it really quick? I mean, could you?
Mrs. Stoddard.
Okay. So that's pretty good.
I love
And it might be because, what I do is I play that with a lot of people, and what happens is they can't get the teacher. And the reason why is because my conjecture, again, my thesis in the game, and about 90% of the time it works for me, is that those two people were highs and lows, okay? But they're there. They're in the back of your head. That's fourth grade, and for you and me, that's 30, 40 years ago, right? So they're in the back of our brain, and you can bring them forward that quick. I can tell you, I mean, I can visually see the playground, right? I can visually see, and of course I wrote it in my book, all of that because emotionally it was that strong, right? And
Right.
that's
Right.
why you're doing what you're doing too. So I can bring back those kids, but you've met thousands and thousands of people along the way. How many of them can you say you remember their first and last names of? That's a big deal to remember that kind of detail of
Right.
people.
Because it embeds in your psyche.
Right. And
You know,
so,
and it can actually impact. I mean, it can impact your behavior for a long time.
oh yeah, like for me, it was something called displaced aggression, but I see it in my son even, who's, a teenager right now and everything sucks and he sucks and the world sucks and this. And I'm like, no, doing my adult rational brain, the world doesn't suck. You don't want to think in black and white. And he's like, well, it is. It's like, I'm not going to win the argument with the teenage brain.
No.
Um, but but that whole idea of even for me is I ended up with two things that I caught on to, and I would tell my mom and later my wife, I'm acting this way because this happened to me, and bullying was at the time for me my excuse for behavior, not understanding that these were real psychological effects. But there's one called displaced aggression. So you might have done it in football, I don't know, but you can't take out your aggression on the aggressor because usually your bully's bigger than you or you feel disempowered or whatever. So you take it out on the loved ones. You come home and you're nasty to your parents or
Right.
whatever. You don't get along with your brother and sister. And then my other one was perceived threat syndrome, and that's something that I called it, which was someone would be disagreeing with me and I would perceive that as a threat. That was a threat. Like I was in bodily trouble, and
Right.
and so my fight or flight was completely off. And so that's where I kind of come from on that stuff. Is I learned later, but even as an adult, I would have those reactions.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So I think that's the troubling thing is that when you're looking at the kids, well, we know a lot of adults have mental illness now due to long-term effects, what's now called CPTSD, and it's interesting to me from your vantage point that you're getting to talk to the kids and see that firsthand today. And like you're bringing up, the stuff like sexting and all of the crazy things that you and
Right.
I wouldn't
Because when you
even.
think about it,
Yeah.
Alan, can you imagine if they had, and that's where, there's a lot wrong. I mean, we survived, you and I survived, and everything's fine. But can you imagine? I can only imagine where I'd show up at football practice and there'd be a tweet out, Keith couldn't open his locker again today,
Yeah.
and it's October, because I flip numbers around in my head, numbers in, like let's say my locker was 36, 42. 14, I would go 14, 36. Then the 14 would become 41, and all of a sudden I can't open my locker. And so I can only imagine that, how much more brutal it would be with social media because they didn't have social media when, of course, when we were going through,
Yeah.
so social media, I was talking to somebody today, and there are people, and I understand where these people are coming from. Oh, bullying's overblown. It's a self manufactured thing. It's not a big deal. Everybody goes through it. What's the big deal? And I was talking to somebody, and this was a school board member, and he was bringing me in. He's like, the whole board voted to bring you here. I don't really think we need you here. He said, I got bullied and I was fine. I said, when did you come through school? He goes, I graduated in '74. I said, so you got bullied. Tell me about that. Oh, people said this. I said,
Mm.
well, tell me, when you went home, did you watch Gilligan's Island? He goes, yeah, that's what I did. I said, did you have some cookies? He said, yeah. I said, did you get a text tell you to kill yourself and die? He said, no. I said, when you went to bed that night, tell me about that. He said, well, mom put me to bed. So you had a mom. Yeah. I said, you probably lived in the same house growing up. Yes, I did. I mean, there's so many other things. These kids have no structure. They don't know whether mom and dad are going to stay together. I said, well, let me ask you this. Let's say you're lying in bed and your phone buzzes and you open it and it's got a link, and the link shows you how to kill yourself. Did you experience that? Did that happen to you back in '74? Well, of course not.
Yeah.
So it's it's just different for these kids.
Well, and the other thing that I think is interesting is, what baggage is he bringing? He's going, yeah, I was bullied and blah blah blah. But is the baggage of his sort of resentment of you coming in, the
I don't
idea
know. I
that,
never
hey,
thought
it
about
happened
that.
to me and I don't want to deal with this.
I don't
You
know.
know what I mean?
I don't know.
Because you think about it, it's like people bring their baggage with them. I know you've worked with enough people. I've worked with enough people that you can read like, hey, this person has baggage left over from their
Oh shit! You
childhood.
could be sitting in the
You
airport, look
know?
up, and see someone coming down the hallway, going, "Man, that person has baggage."
Yeah, I mean, and
Yeah.
and and they wear it, and a lot of the times I've talked, I luckily have a juvenile judge that I know who will defend me every time someone says, "Oh, it's just kids being kids." I tell my son, beat him up, just throw the punch, throw the first punch, and the juvenile judge that will come to some of my engagements will say, raise her hand, and I'll be like, yeah, and I know what she's going to say. She's going to go, so sir, if you're an adult and you do that, what's that called? It's
Right.
like, oh,
Called
that's
assault.
assault. Yeah, so you're teaching your kid
Called aggravated
assault.
assault, right?
Right, aggravate. So believe it or not, we got to take a break, and when we come back, I really want to talk about what you're doing today, how you use humor, and how you're reaching to these kids, and what you're seeing. What you're really seeing as you do this work. But we just have to take a quick break, Keith. This is a
Okay, I'll be
great
back.
conversation.
You're listening to Healthy University with Alan Eisenberg.
Deep in a dark hole in the recesses of his mind, Alan tried to bury all the bad memories of the bullying that happened to him. But memories can't be buried, and he would be haunted by his youth and these memories for a very long time to come. Then he must confront and come to terms with his own youth and the things that happened to him. Find out what Alan didn't want to remember. Read A Ladder in the Dark, My Journey from Bullying to Self-Acceptance. Available now at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and most major book retail outlets. Hi, and welcome back to Healthy University. This is Alan Eisenberg, and I'm talking with Keith Deltano, who is a speaker now and an anti-bullying activist who speaks all around the country to many school-age kids and schools about the issue of bullying and other issues going on in the schools. I think he's got several ways. And what's neat, Keith, is you used humor. You use humor. Do you think that humor for you came from the fact that you had a rough time, and
Oh
so you
yeah.
found humor to be that thing that
Oh yeah.
helped?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I couldn't, like I shared earlier, I could not do school, and I had not figured out football. I wasn't good at sports until I noticed there was this sport, and girls would stand on the side of this field with white lines and they would cheer for you. And I found that appealing. So I
I don't know
started to
why.
play football, but I like the comedy was a reaction to like things that I would do, and I had to have some kind of explanation for it. So like I flop numbers like I share with you, and times and stuff, and like so I might walk into my 10:30 class my freshman year at 9:30. I'll walk
Mm.
5 yards into it and wonder what all the strange people are doing in there, right? Why are these people here? So like a lot of times I had to, people would be looking at me because I was doing something wrong, and but not intending to. And so I would come up with some kind of crazy one-liner, like, and so storytelling was an effective way for me to entertain people and I was good at it, and it was the thing that I could do that other people couldn't do. Okay, maybe I can't spell cat. To me, why isn't it a K? Seems like K would work really well. But I can make people laugh. So, yeah, it was a coping skill. I didn't think of it as being something effective as a tool until I was in the Army. And I thought of it as something I could do. And two things happened in the Army. The Army was pivotal for me, and I'm grateful for the Army. I got money for college, but it showed me a lot of things about myself I just didn't know. And one day, two things happened. We were in this Dusenhaft in Germany, and we were sitting in this thing for hours because the Army's all about hurry up and wait.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm in there with some of the toughest guys from America, guys from the Bronx, and we're stuck there, and we're bored. And all of a sudden, this guy goes, "Hey, Deltano, tell one of your stories," right? And so I told a story about Kenny and I developing our first parachute. Kenny was always inventing things. I told these stories, and the guys loved them. I mean, these tough guys love these stories. And I'm like, wow, I'm kind of good at this, And then the other time, and so I use comedy as a tool, which makes me different from other comedians that just want to be funny. So there's always a purpose to what I'm trying to do. The time I really realized there was some power in it was I was at Fort Bragg, and a Green Beret was called in for domestic disturbance.
Mm.
And so I'm in my cruiser, and I'm only a 21-year-old kid, and I get to put the blue lights on. I'm all excited that I get to put the blue lights on because that's so much fun. You get to put the blue lights on. You get to drive really fast, and when you're a 21-year-old kid, that's like the best thing ever, right? And I got a loaded weapon, and I got a 20, and I'm flying along. And at Fort Bragg, when you register your weapon, so they're saying, yeah, we got the Green Beret. He's a Green Beret, and he's got a samurai sword. He's got a 357 Magnum. I mean, they're reading me what this guy's got. And the only reason why this guy hadn't been kicked out of the Army is the Army had hundreds of thousands of dollars in his training, someone told me later. But either way, I'm going to this guy's house, and I'm starting to slow down, Alan, because I don't want to be the first guy there. But I'm the first guy there. And I get up to the house, and I bang on the door, and a guy opens the door, and his wife is behind him, and apparently you could tell he's made physical contact with his wife, which means I've got to arrest this guy.
Yeah.
So he opens the door, what are you, and he's all fired up. And so without saying a word, I leaned over his threshold, and I looked, and he punched a hole through the wall.
Mm.
And I said, wow. I said, you got through both layers of sheetrock. I can see your bedroom. Most guys only get through one layer of sheetrock. And I start doing stand-up in this guy's living room, right? I said, do you often punch both layers? And I'm just doing stand-up, right? Just weird, goofy stuff, right? Yeah. And the guy starts laughing. And he calms down. And I took my cuffs out, and I dangled them from my finger. I said, look, will you mind putting these on because I got to take you down because you hit your wife. And he cuffed himself, right?
Yeah.
And I walked the guy out, and I put him in my cruiser and the back seat. And my sergeant pulls up, and he said, how did you do that? How did you do that? It takes 10 of us to get this guy in a cruiser. I said, Sarge, I think I did comedy. And I became for the rest of I became the domestic disturbance and bar fight specialist. They'd call me, get Deltano, and they'd call me, and we got another, they'd like be waiting out on the road, and they say, we got another one, like go up there and do your thing, right? And it was the most phenomenal thing. And then I became a school teacher, and I got to teach these kids area of a circle. What could be more boring than finding area of a circle?
Right.
So I'm going to make up some kind of story about a pool or something. And so the comedy for me has been a vehicle. So it's funny, Alan, I will get calls, and I'll get calls like, hey, we're having an event. We saw your stuff online. We just want you to come and be clean and funny between the bands. And it's not me. I will die. I'm not funny. I cannot, I used to do clubs, right?
Yeah.
And I got to be teaching something. I did P. Diddy's Comedy Search, and I was the last white guy standing here in North Carolina. But even then, my message was, we got problems here with race, but it's still the greatest country on the planet, right? So that was the theme of my stand-up bit. So even then, in a club at 2 a.m, I'm teaching something, right?
Well, you just watched Chris Rock get away with the same thing doing the Oscars if you watched him.
Right,
Making comedy out of a serious matter. And,
right,
and you know what's really fascinating about that is, and I don't know if you're into mindfulness or, this whole, this idea that, the Eastern influence, like if we can be mindful of our behaviors, we
right,
could we could live a lot better. So if you're not reactive, right? So somebody's angry, and if you don't get angry back,
right. I
if
do
you use
not.
comedy, that's really mindfulness. That's really being mindful of who you are and what you do. I,
I didn't know anything about mindfulness.
right,
I just didn't want to get stabbed with a samurai sword.
exactly. But but
And
you're also thinking like, hey, I don't need to treat this guy badly, right?
no,
I can resolve this situation. And so I had a trip to Thailand, and the Buddhist culture doesn't use violence at all, and they're very opposite sort of our philosophy of how to handle situations. And I watched this situation unfold once that was like we were doing a show, and this guy dropped this like metal beam on this New Yorker guy that was with us, and he went after that guy, and the Thai worker just drops his head down, and then this whole security patrol comes around, heads down, arms linked, surround the guy and pull him away from the whole group. They don't look at him, they don't say anything, they don't do anything. He's screaming at all of them. They won't let him
right,
out of this circle, and eventually he calms down and everything dissipates, and the guy that dropped the beam is long gone. And I was
right.
like, wow,
Yeah,
totally handled without any
physical violence.
physical violence,
Right.
yelling, screaming, nothing.
But
And I'm
the,
like,
the comedy's cross cultural too,
yeah,
because like I've been to all 50 states, so doing a show in Powell, Wyoming, is not the same as doing a show as inner city LA. And but what the comedy allows me to do is the kids know I know their culture. So, like if I'm the only white dude in the building, when I first run up there, there's some skepticism. But once they start laughing, that's gone. Do you know what I mean?
well, yeah,
So
yeah,
comedy's a cross cultural thing, so it allows me to go different places. And the other thing about comedy is it helps kids memorize. They memorize the laugh line. Like if you saw my clip, I've got that line. I'm a Walmart shopper and I'm proud. I don't know if you saw that.
yeah, I did.
I've got certain lines. And the kids will email me. They'll tweet those lines. I'll run into kids, a long time after. I'll go back. School systems will bring me back, and kids will tell me the lines. Well, here's what's cool about that. I'm a Walmart shopper and I'm proud line. That line is in a component of the talk where I'm teaching not to judge people by race, ethnicity, or clothing.
Right.
But instead of saying don't judge people by race, ethnicity, and clothing, I make fun of the whole, you got to have a certain label, you got to have a certain sneaker, what are those, and all that stuff. And then I end with that line. And that line teaches the concept without me talking at them,
Right.
right? They
Right.
internalize it. And the other thing that's really cool is laughter shows agreement. And I don't tell the kids this because they'd stop laughing. But okay, let's say someone tells you a joke, right? If you laugh at it, you agreed with
With the humor, yeah, with the
but you agreed with the statement of the joke,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So when these kids are laughing, they're laughing at their culture. They're laughing at the ridiculousness of spending $100 for a sweatshirt because it says Under Armour on it,
Yeah.
right? So the laughter shows that they're buying what I'm selling.
Right. They're getting that, by you making it humorous, how silly it is what they're think
Some of the
what
things
they
they
were
do, right?
thinking. Yeah, you're
Right.
not going to get everybody. I don't. Did you ever watch that show Key and Peele?
No.
No, they're these two African American comedians, and they've gone on now. They're getting big. They're in movies and stuff. They did two skits. One was where a black substitute teacher comes into an all white school, and
Uh-huh.
as he's doing the roll call, he's pronouncing all the names in what would be like an African American name, and it wasn't their name. It was like, uh, I'm trying to remember one of them, but they couldn't, the white kids couldn't understand it, and it was very humorous, uh, sort of in that same way of like the differences, making fun of the differences.
Right.
But the one that was really powerful and that I'd say go check out on YouTube, they did one where it was about bullying, and what they did is they had all the thoughts that were going through the kid who was being bullied and the kid who was the bully's brain, they were saying out loud. So the bully's like, I'm doing this because I get beat at home, and so I'm going to take it out on you, and then he slaps his friend's hand, like,
Right.
and it's like really powerful. And then the dad drives up and he goes, son, get in this car. If you don't get in here right now, I'm gonna beat your ass. But no matter what, when I get home, I think I'll beat your ass anyway. And he's
Right.
saying that to the bully, and it's like, whoa, whoa, that's a powerful. It almost was funny, and then it wasn't. You know what I'm
Right. Well,
saying?
that's see, none of this stuff. When you think about it, Alan, none of the stuff I'm talking about is funny.
Right.
I mean, it's just not. I mean,
Right.
suicide's not funny.
Oh no.
Cutting's not funny. Anorexia, bulimia. But the thing is, if you come to my show, it's like a cycle in that we're funny, and then you can hear a pin drop. So the comedy's just the tool. It's not as important to me as getting a kid. Okay, here's the ultimate. Where and when I use before I got my clips, like when I first started out of the gate, it was very hard for me to get booked. It was very hard for me to get shows because I'm like, well, I'd like to come to your school, or I'd like to come to your church and talk about sex, drugs, alcohol, bullying, race, prejudice, right? Well, the people that I was approaching were like, well, how can you use comedy to do this? These are serious things. And people would not book me, right?
Yeah.
And then I started getting enough money to get some people to film me, and then they could see what I was doing. But the goal is change. And the goal at the high school level, the show is like a net that pulls out hurting kids. So, a lot of times, like I've got this, it's very, I went to Jersey and just recently, and this great kid, awesome kid, I hang out after the shows because I tell the guidance counselors, look, stay 15, 20 feet away from me because they won't come up to me if you're right next to me. And kids will come up to me, and a lot of them high five, fist bump, hug, but some of them I can see in their eyes, and they'll come up, I'm cutting on my inner thigh, nobody
Mm-hmm.
knows. And I'll say, okay, let's go over and get you help. And sometimes kids say, I don't want to talk to them. And I tell them this, I said, look, by law, what you told me, I cannot, it's against the
Yeah.
law for me to not get you some help. I will literally, it actually is, Alan.
Yeah.
When you
Yeah. I
know
know.
about,
Yeah.
and so I get them help. And the things that got these kids down to and talk to me, and the thing that, and these kids, I get approached, and this is why I keep doing what I'm doing because it's tough, Alan. I'm sleeping in hotels, I'm stuck at airports, and I'm missing my kids' stuff, and I don't know whether I'm going to make the mortgage one month and then the next month books up, and it's just crazy. Is these kind of interactions where, I was in Oregon and a kid came up to me and said, I've been thinking about suicide all week, and I walked that kid over, and it was a big kid, big, muscular. A lot of times in our mind we think what a suicidal kid looks like. Green hair and
Yeah.
the goth look, and it's not. This looked like an all-American athlete kid. That kid messaged me on Instagram, and he said, I'm messaging you because they're going to take my phone, and they're committing me right now, and I wanted to thank you.
Yeah.
And that was 4 hours after I left that school. So that kid was so at risk that
Yeah.
they hospitalized him right then. And the thing that got that kid down, Alan, was the comedy.
Yeah.
The comedy gets them open. Where all of a sudden, because some guy, when you think about all the obstacles against me, when you think about it, I'm older, I'm not cool looking, I'm talking in assembly, the kids hate assemblies, they're usually pretty boring. And so I've got all these obstacles to connect with those kids. So the comedy allows me to connect with them. And so it's a tool. And sometimes that is the result. The comedy's like a net. and it sucks them in, and it makes them, because I make fun of myself, and all the
Right.
crazy stuff I
Right.
went
It's
through.
the
So anyway,
self-effacing stuff. I mean,
yeah,
that's what
yeah,
I spend a lot of time doing. I want anyone who's listening to me or listening to you probably the same thing. You want them to understand they're not alone. Like my whole thing is
right,
you are not alone.
right.
I'm standing up here because I
But if they
can.
stay alone, Alan,
Yeah.
I'm telling you,
Uh,
study after study,
yeah.
these kids that are committing suicide, cutting, and I say this, and I don't have a clip of this, and it's a real emotional point of my show towards the end. Of course, when I'm in front of third graders, I don't talk about suicide and
Yeah.
cutting and all that, but I say, look, and I say, if you hang on to this, man, it's gonna, you can't, you've got to, and by this I've talked about how much we love them, even though we're old and grumpy and we're tired and we have, all kinds of our problems. That's why, but we do love them,
Yeah.
and your guidance counselor loves you, and I'll point to that tough looking SRO officer. He loves you. I go, do you love him? This tough looking guy go, I love him. I said, look, you got to share this with us, and I gesture like giving up. Because when they're isolated, that's when they harm themselves. When they feel like nobody understands what I'm going, or I'm hearing voices.
Yeah.
I mean, some of these kids are dealing with serious mental illness. It's not related to bullying at all.
Yeah. It's
It's
schizophrenia
it's
or
genetic,
bipolar. Yeah.
and that I wrote a post on my blog. I get so upset uh, with schools because we dropped the ball on such with dealing with bullying and cutting and suicide. I had a principal come out to me and go, well, we just sent all our counselors to a workshop in California on how to counsel kids on suicide. So I spent all day at that school. I'm like, there's no sign here that says that.
Yeah.
Like, if you walk into the average American school, right? There is no poster, there's no sign, there's nothing that says, hey, suicidal thoughts, struggling with cuddling, struggling with cutting, see Miss Jones in room 5B. There's nothing like that, Alan. And
I
here's
know.
what,
I know.
and we spent millions, right? And here's what freaks me out. So I go up, now this principal had a PhD. That's another thing in education. It seems like the more darn doctorates you get, the less you know, right? And I go up to him, I said, well, I'm glad that your counselors got trained. I said, but there's no signage in the school that lets your kids know that there's help there.
Yeah.
You know what this man said to me? He goes, oh, they know where to go. And I'm like, no, they don't. You're adults. So your adult brain goes, oh, this 15-year-old kid knows that the word guidance is in guidance counselor. So this kid knows that if he's hearing voices, this kid knows that he can go see the guidance counselor. Well, no, he does not. He doesn't know anything like that
Yeah.
because he's a 15-year-old kid and he's not thinking logical thoughts.
Yeah.
And if
And
he was
or
thinking
yeah.
logical thoughts, he wouldn't be thinking he wouldn't be thinking about walking. He needs to see a sign. And it gets me so upset when I work with schools. They'll do all this theoretical stuff, Alan. They'll
Oh
go
yeah.
to
Oh yeah.
workshops and they'll learn all this fancy language, and then they won't do simple things, just simple things. Like having a monitor out where the kids get off the buses.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just they won't have sign. And with suicide, which was not when I started rolling, I didn't think I would be, but one of the formulas I have was whatever I'm dealing with, I do a tense amount of study. You may not sense it in my show, but there's a tense amount of study, statistics, behaviors, why kids
Oh
do what
yeah.
they do. And then I write the show. So the link between suicide and bullying, is very well documented. It wasn't so much a decade ago, but it is now.
Oh yeah.
So then I started dealing with suicide. And it's just so frustrating.
Yeah.
I'll go into middle school and administrator will come up to me and say, hey, Keith, we watched your clip now. Now, when I'm, middle school, 6th through 8th grade, 6th grade is a strange grade. The kids look like Barbie, some of them, and some of them play with
Yeah.
Barbie.
Exactly.
So in 6th grade, usually when in middle school, a lot of times I'm like, let's do 6th grade separate. But by 7th and 8th grade, they're sexting, they're texting, doing all this stuff. And I'll have a principal come and say, "Hey, Keith, we saw that you clip. We love your clip. Look, suicide's a tough topic. We noticed you do talk a little bit about that. We really don't want you to discuss that here, right?" And that is just
Yeah.
so
Well, they don't give kids the credit, number one, I'll tell you, Keith. And the other one that I always talk about is, none of this, like you're going to this thing and all of a sudden this kid's coming forward. But there are these teachers, and you were there once, I know, and I say you take attendance. So you go, Jimmy here, Jane here. But what if you took emotional attendance and said,
right.
Jimmy showed up and his grades are falling and he's not talking and this and this. You know what I'm saying? But no one has time for that. And then you got
Well,
the problem like you're talking about where there's no signage in the school because they're doing what we call in my field of training, check the box training, right? You were in the
man,
army, there's
yeah,
check the
you're
box
right.
training.
Alan, I'm
It's like
stealing that.
it's like
Check
the
the
school
box.
says, "Oh, we sent all the guidance counselors to suicide training. Check the box."
Check the box. I'm
But
stealing
it's
that.
not
I'm
real.
doing a post on it. I'm not even giving you credit. Check, yeah, a lot of now. I'm
Check
not.
the box
I'm not
training.
belittling public education,
No, no.
but there's a tremendous amount of pressure on schools now as far as testing scores.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
So these teachers and administrators, a lot of times, if it doesn't have to do with testing scores, it doesn't show up on their radars. So a lot of times, yeah, they'll have I have a curriculum, I have videos, and a lot of time now, this isn't every schools. There's two kind of schools that use me, Alan. Schools that use me and schools that check the box. And I never realized this.
Yep.
Like I have a curriculum that has follow-up videos, I have websites, I have all these tools that schools can use after they bring me in. But a lot of them don't. And a lot of them with their anti-bullying, anti-suicide efforts, you're correct. I couldn't put it in a succinct way. I wrote that blog post, but
Mm.
you wrapped it up. They're just checking the
Yeah,
box.
it's check the box.
They're
And
checking the box so that if
and
suicide happens and the lawsuit comes, they can say we sent them to, they can say we try to do what we can do.
yeah.
You
And
know,
and you can watch the movie Bully, which was just filmed a couple of years ago, and you'll
right?
see it. You'll see they fired the administrators of that school after the movie. Because here they are. I mean, this is what's crazy to me. These people know they have cameras on them. They know they're making a documentary. They probably know it's about bullying, and they
Yeah.
still act this way. They still
Well,
did the stuff they shouldn't have done. And that you and I
here's
know
what.
is so past kids being kids. We don't talk about kids being kids anymore. We're actually running out of time, and I have one question I just love to ask you,
Uh,
other than the fact that will you come back and do a part two because I don't think we hit half of what we wanted to talk about.
sure.
But my final thing to you, and then I want to give you a chance to tell everybody how to get in touch with you because I think you're an amazing speaker, I'm sure, from what I've seen on the clips, and you make a difference. But if you can go back, so now we have the Wayback Machine, and you're an adult with an adult brain, and there you are with your 13, or 12-year-old self, maybe younger, I guess third grade. What would you say, to try to help ease that pain that you were feeling at that age? What would you say now? What kind of wisdom would you impart?
You're not stupid.
Yeah.
I would tell the third grade, the kid that I was with all my learning disabilities, and if I could like show up out of the future and the third grade would knew it was me,
Right.
I would say you're not stupid. You're just different.
Don't believe everything that you hear. Yeah. Don't don't
No,
don't believe
and
it.
yeah, you're not stupid. It's
Well,
gonna be all right.
you're amazing. You're an inspiration. I think you're doing great stuff. How can people get in touch with you? How can people get you to come to their school or learn
Uh,
more about you?
my website. Somebody told me my last name's Deltano. They said nobody would memorize it. It's Italian, but you could. I tour all over the country. I go to like South Georgia and I tell them my name. They think I'm like Tony Soprano. But
From
you
North Carolina.
yeah, yeah, yeah. My website is Don't Bully Online. So the best way for your listeners to memorize this, if they're struggling for survival on the Beltway, is what do we want our kids to do? We don't want them to bully online, so it's don'tbullyonline.com. And then the other way is just Google me. It's Keith. That's easy. And Deltano. That's a little harder, but I told my drill sergeant one time in Alabama, it's just Delta, like Delta Airlines, with a no at the end. He did not appreciate that. But that's the easiest way to memorize. Keith, like Keith Partridge, and then Deltano, like Delta Airlines with a no at the end. And I travel all over the country and work with different age levels. I do parent workshops on keeping your children safe online. And I also do teacher workshops on how to stop all this madness from happening in the first place.
Wow. Yeah, like I said, I think you're doing great work, and I think it needs to be done. And just like others of us who are trying to make a difference, make healthier lives, give the future the healthier life that maybe we didn't have as a child growing up. I just want to thank you for being on the show. Number one, I really appreciate it. I think you offered a lot to the listeners.
Thanks. Well, I appreciate the work you're doing helping adults deal with this.
Thank you. This is Alan Eisenberg at Healthy University. Again, get in touch with Keith Deltano at don'tbullyonline.com. He's doing great work. You can go on YouTube, look him up, and see videos of his school performances and how good he is at what he does. This is Alan Eisenberg at Healthy University. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you join us next time.
Thank you for listening to Healthy University, brought to you by Bullying Recovery, LLC. This podcast does not replace the need for medical advice, professional diagnosis, opinion, treatment, or services to you or any other individual. The information provided here or through linkages to other sites is not a substitute for medical or professional care, and you should not use the information in place of a visit, call, consultation, or the advice of your physician or other healthcare provider. Join us next time for more Healthy University.